Good afternoon, everybody. I think without much further ado, we will go straight into the session because some of my speakers also have to be at Diggy Palace at the very same time as that they are here, which is not physically possible to accomplish, unfortunately. Uh, I will dispense with the introduction, the broad generic topic of the Indian reader is enough for you to understand that we are going to be talking about many things because there is no homogeneous category of an Indian reader. It is something that we need to unpack together. I will first ask Rita Kothari to talk because she has the session at Diggy Palace very shortly. She's an academic and she's engaged with the whole idea of many Indian languages and their relationship with English as an academic as well as a translator and as somebody who talks about issues of uh, what has happened to Indian languages vis-a-vis English as well as what has happened to Indian languages per se. So I will first invite Rita to make her presentation. We'll give her about 5 to 7 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you, Manisha. And my apologies for being so shameless and saying I need to go first and I absolutely need to speak and then leave without hearing my co-panelists here. But such is the way it is. So one is that, when I heard this topic, Indian reader, my first response, Manisha, was to I was reminded of this very well-known essay by A.K. Ramanujan, which is there an Indian way of thinking? And he says we can ask the same question in at least about 7 different ways, which is to say, is there an Indian way of thinking? Is there an Indian way of thinking? Or is there an Indian way of thinking? So you could do that with Indian reader, and you could ask, is there really an Indian reader? Or you could even put a question mark against reader, as some people would say that reading habits have gone down drastically, and so on and so forth. I work in Western India. I sort of move between Sindhi, Gujarati, Kutchi, and read in several other languages. And my own feeling, my own sort of thinking on this subject has been that first we need to understand that there is no unitary sense of language. That language itself is not as unitary as we make it out to be. We tend to think languages in terms of these very discrete entities with well-defined borders, with ways by which if Hindi had to reach Gujarati, it could only do through translation, or that it is possible to think that this is Hindi and this is exactly the point at which it originated. I think languages like rivers do not really have origins. In my own research on Sindhi and Gujarati, I can say this, that there is when you need to establish language as an institution, very often you need to separate and deterritorialize and say, on the north part of Gujarat, it is what separates here from Marwadi. This is Marwadi and this is Gujarati. You go down south, you say this is Dangi, this is Marathi, and this is Gujarati. So given that lack of unitariness, it is only natural that the reader itself would not be a unitary entity. The tribal in Gujarat is not going to be reading, first of all, and is not going to be reading in Gujarati. The Dalit in Gujarat is clearly saying that the kind of very upper caste Dalit Gujarati that is being used today is far more distant to me than English languages. So even our relationship with English language is extremely complex, right? It is both dominating, oppressing, but it is also extremely liberating, and it has all these sort of paradoxical effects. The other language, Sindhi, which is my mother tongue, and even this whole institution of mother tongue itself is a historic construction, but we shan't go into that right now. The biggest worry for people in the community for a long time used to be about which script to use, and it is a very controversial subject about whether Sindhi should have the Perso-Arabic script or whether it should have the Devanagari script. Since this remained an unresolved question, you do not find Sindhi on the Indian rupee, because we did not come to a conclusion about it. But we've come to a point now where the community says, doesn't matter which script it is as long as people speak the language. The worry about reading has gone, the worry about writing has gone. There are more books than readers, more writers than readers in the language. And yet, very interestingly, every book published in this language, in Sindhi, because it is a linguistic minority, every book is funded very generously by state institutions. So the state has performed its token gesture and it has supported in some sense, but the state cannot help sustain a readership because the state did not provide to the language a linguistic state when partition happened. So you would notice that in every language the issues are also very different. Right? If some languages are worried about survival, some other languages are worried about readership. And the enemy, if you like, in every case is not English language at all. There are also internal forms of other colonizations and linguistic economies that sort of tend to take place. Let me give you an example of this very successful Gujarati bestseller writer, whom some of you may have heard of, those who are in the publishing industry. Her name is Kajal Oza Vaidya. And she writes very accessible, very, very popular, and most often serialized novels. Now, she sees herself, and I suppose rightly so, she sees herself as an international writer, thereby changing even the notion of locality and readership. Because Gujarat diaspora has such huge outreach that she's just being read everywhere. Wherever she goes in any part of the world, there is a Gujarati diaspora and it is reading her, and she survives entirely on the basis of returns from her novels. I mean, we would think that only certain kinds of writers do, and we tend to think that only those who write in English do. We have a very stereotyped sometimes notion about how Indian language writers are languishing. While that may be true in some respect, it is certainly not true in her respect, because she's doing extremely well. And she's an international writer. So even our understanding of what constitutes locality and what constitutes limited sphere for an Indian language is different here, given the combination of two things. One is the content, the things that she's talking about, which are in this in-between zone of creating, sort of making the more sort of slightly upper class Gujarati reader feel that he or she is reading very meaningful work. And also ones people who need a good story to be told, which is not sort of awfully profound, they also feel that they've got something out of it. But there is a very interesting example, a format here to be sort of looked at. And yet with all this, Gujarat also, like many other languages, has this Matrubhasha Abhiyan. And it is constantly complaining about the fact that the reading has gone down, the language has gone down, and it has these, in Mr. Modi's time, they started these campaigns called Vache Gujarat. So then you had a bunch of literary writers going from village to all parts of Gujarat, goading people to read. So I think all I want to say is to complicate from the title of the panel to even to the idea of even a regional writer or a local writer, and suggest that there are huge complexities lying in between, very, very fragmented spheres, and yet sometimes there are these examples of the kind that I cited, which actually defy all the calculations that we are making. I will now shamelessly get up and leave because I have to go to Diggy Palace, and my apologies once again to the panel and to Manisha for abandoning you. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, we are sorry that we are being abandoned at the start of a very interesting conversation, particularly with regard to how language is not confined to geography anymore. Rita has very pertinently raised the point that the Gujarati diaspora, which is economically quite sound, has managed to create a Gujarati writer as an international writer. And rightly so. I mean, why should we not call a local writer an international writer? Why should we grudge her that status, if we like? So, you know, since we know that the whole question of language is an emotive one, it's a complex one, it's to do with geography, it's to do with culture, it's to do with self-expression, and somewhere it has to do with the economics of publishing as well. So we cannot gainsay the fact that English language publishing has dominated many formats. It has dominated how we market. Dr. John Mackinson's address right before this panel indicated some of those areas and said that, you know, what is it that influences publishing in a particular way at a given point in time has to do with the historical moment in the country. historical moment in the world, if you like, in the knowledge industry. I would now invite Professor Nirmal Kanti Bhattacharjee to give his views, because he has a vantage point of having worked with the Government of India in two august bodies, National Book Trust and Sahitya Academy, for us to better understand how is it that the state has looked at what we are talking about today, that is the Indian reader. Who is the Indian reader according to the state? Has it changed from the time that post-independence these institutions were set up? Is the Indian reader better understood by the state as the recipient of certain kinds of ideas? That is what I would request him to start his remarks with.
Thank you, Manisha. Um, the role of state, particularly the autonomous organizations functioning under the Ministry of Culture or Ministry of Human Resource Development, which the moderator just now mentioned and asked me to elaborate a little. Before getting into that, I'd like to begin with where Rita just finished, because there's the same kind of situation has obtained in case of Bengali also. And Bengali being my mother tongue, I'm well aware of the fact that a lot of Bengali diaspora living abroad, particularly in the USA, UK, and Canada, want to have books from Bengal, popular books from Bengal, but not in Bengali script. They want it in Roman script. So that means that they are capable of understanding Bengali when they hear it, but they cannot read because of certain objective conditions, obtaining in their life. So a demand was there that why not Rabindranath Tagore be published in Roman script, and there will be a lot of consumer market for that abroad. Some of these demands have been met by a couple of organizations in Delhi and Calcutta, but it's a huge task to transfer the entire Bengali literature into Roman script. But that is a pointer to the fact that yes, literature is not necessarily conditioned by accessibility to the language or to the script at least. Coming back to the role of state, yes, I have worked with the National Book Trust and I have worked with the Sahitya Academy, maybe the two most prestigious organizations in the country. What I felt that as far as these organizations were concerned, the Indian reader to begin with, as for all of us, was the middle class educated people. This was the target readership. Educated middle class were the greatest consumers of Indian books. But the demography of Indian readership has since changed, thanks to neo-literacy, thanks to many other developments in the country, and a lot of new readers are coming up. Statistics will show that in many of the languages of India today, glossy magazines and newspapers, tabloids, sell enormously. From the statistics of the book sale, you won't be able to really gauge the reading habit of the people or the book hunger of the people. The hunger is being satisfied in a different way. And we find the market is flooded with all those magazines and newspapers. And we often wonder that how they sustain. So that means a kind of book hunger is there, a kind of demand for readership is there, reading material is there, and it is not necessarily always been supplied by books of the higher order. I put higher order on an inverted commas. As far as the state's view on the kind of books they should publish, one moot point was, as translation is one of the focuses of this JBM this year. So one of the major activities undertaken by these two state organizations were to translate, to kind of a give and take amongst the Indian languages. Again here, the interest was that good books from these languages are being translated into English as such. And English is a huge market, and the publishers' market dynamics will somehow satisfy this. And books are being published in English from Indian languages. So idea here was the interlingual translation of Indian language books from Tamil into Bangla or from Assamese into Kashmiri kind of things. So one particular problem was met there. The problem was that always you don't get direct translators from one language into another. So where do you go? Again, you have to come back to English. So what happens? A Kashmiri book or an Urdu book is first translated into English, and then from English it is translated into all other Indian languages through the filter language. Sometimes, of course, Hindi also serves the purpose, but if you get it in Hindi, it may not serve the purpose in the southern states. So the both Sahitya Academy and NBT decided to do it in English first and then to take it into many other languages. So in this way, this Adan Pradhan series of National Book Trust, Adan Pradhan means give and take. That series actually focused on the translation of literature, literary books from one Indian language into another Indian language. And mind you, it's a very, very vast kind of mobilization is necessary because we have 24 languages. So if you take up one book, then one into 23 other books. So each book is yielding 23 more versions. So which is a stupendous task. I'm not claiming that that task has been met with the kind of success which was expected, but I would dare say that a lot of effort was given and a lot of achievement was there for anyone to see. The other kind of books which are being published by the state, particularly by the NBT, is a national biography series, then a series called Young India Library, then another series called Popular Science, another series called Popular Social Science kind of books. So here the Indian reader for them is not necessarily the consumer of literature, but Indian reader for them here is anyone who has a craving or hunger for knowledge. So far as Sahitya Academy is concerned, of course, literature is the forte and the main focus is in literature. So taking a cue from what Rita has just finished saying, just left after saying, I would say that the role of the state, as she mentioned, the Sindhi language, and in Sindhi, despite the fact that state has subsidized and funded a lot of publishing, still the problem remains because Sindhi does not have any state. And this applies to Urdu also. These are the two languages in India who are stateless languages. All other languages have a particular state. That is one of the fallout of the linguistic reorganization of states in India. So as a result, what happened, certain issues of Sindhi and Urdu could not be addressed properly, though in some states they are second language. They have been declared as second language. And the script, the vexed question of creep always remains. But I have one particular regret, having worked in these organizations, is that a national academy in many countries of the world addresses the issue of standardizing the spelling, standardizing the script, but somehow in India that has not happened. So there is a kind of anarchy there in the spelling. In my language, in Bangla, there are any number of spelling procedures going on. Calcutta University demands that this is the most standardized spelling in Bangla. Vishwabharati University goes in a different direction. So a chaos is there. Then Anandabazar Patrika, which virtually rules the roost so far as publishing is concerned, they follow a different method of spelling. So some kind of state organization perhaps should come forward to stop this anarchy, to standardize the spelling, to standardize the script, the question of script in both Urdu and Sindhi, because despite the state funding, the books don't sell. Sindhi books are stored in the godown of these organizations. Urdu books are stored in the godown of these organizations. So a demand is there, why not publish them in Nagari scripts so that it is more accessible to people. So in this way, the contours of readers of India change according to the changed condition of the society. Thank you.
I think Professor Bhattacharjee has raised a number of very significant issues, not the least one being that publishing and education are somewhere inseparable. Secondly, post-independence, organizations such as the NBT and Sahitya Academy had a clear mandate of also nation building, along with the idea of organizations which will encourage publishing of literature and works of literature and make them accessible to different parts of the country and encourage cultural exchange across the country, which very easily leads me on to the question of the 24 official languages as opposed to the 786 counted languages in the last People's Linguistic Survey of India, and the whole separation between a language and a boli, what is spoken and what is published in, what is printed and what is merely in speech. So the People's Linguistic Survey of India has, on last count, counted 786 languages. And I believe that from post-independence until the last census, we have lost up to 250 languages. However, Professor Ganesh Devi, who has been spearheading this whole idea of a People's Linguistic Survey, believes that until there are two people speaking a language, it exists. It has not actually fallen off the map of the world. So if we believe that, I think I would now invite Ruby to give her views on what does she feel about the Indian reader who has been sort of missing from our conversations about the Indian reader. What about the Adivasi reader? What about the Adivasi reader as somebody who has something important to say but is quite unsure about what script to say it in, is somewhat unsure about not wanting to be an anthropological curiosity, but somebody who has something serious to say about their own culture. And that whole problem of if we want to mainstream the Adivasi reader, you simply translate a mainstream text into Adivasi language. Is that good enough anymore? Or is there a strong voice from the Adivasis where they see themselves as legitimate writers and readers in their own language?
So here I represent the marginalized languages, some languages of marginalized peoples. And I would say there is this great grudge, not only towards, let's say, English. We would rather write in English than the regional dominant languages. So when we talk of a state, we're still in the margins. So what's happened is suddenly from peoples with no script, we become peoples of, let's say, 5 scripts. How does that happen for someone of the Santal tribe, for example? So we are situated across India in, let's say, 5 major states, and each state has a regional dominant language, and we are expected to write in those. So despite 2 Indian languages being, 2 Adivasi Indian languages being in the official languages count, I still cannot speak it without people asking me which country or which language I'm speaking from. So ethnicity is again a big problem over there. So people don't know. Now, what's happened with the 5 scripts is now that we are writing, so let's say in Santali we have a population of 75 lakhs, and literacy rate of 50%, that's again, I think, exaggerated. But we can only write in the regional dominant script. Now, many of us don't know all those 5 regional dominant scripts. So what happens? How do we read each other? Who is reading us? We are writing, but we don't have enough Santals reading those languages. Now, something that's happened with, let's say, the Sahitya Academy, where now they endorse one script as the official script, which means you deny people who write in 4 other scripts from actually sharing their stories. Now, we now have gotten into transliteration. Now, if I want to write in, let's say, the Bangla script, and I want my writing to be submitted to the Sahitya Academy, I need to get a Santal writer who writes in Olchiki. And I say, I hope it's accurate. Please just transcribe it for me, transliterate it, and let's submit it. So that's what's happening. So we are now losing our languages, but we're also being divided by script. So we have a lot of literary festivals, but only script specific. So someone who writes in the Roman script does not go to a literary festival of the same tribe, because they are only advocating for the Olchiki. So that's what's happening. So we're having a lot of events. We're writing a lot. Newspapers come out, but all in different scripts. So we are united only in the language, but not in the script. So we don't know how that's going to get any better. For example, when somebody, a Santhal writer, wins a national award, many of us who don't read that script don't know how good or bad he is. So we are again denied literature that is being awarded, let's say, getting a lot of recognition, not knowing how good or bad they are. So what do we do there? We can't read it. So we either ask them to read it out to us, ask somebody to read it to us, or translate it for us. I mean, it's really difficult. It is a little chaotic. So here we are, people who are new readers, new writers, but then again we have issues with what language we can write in. So a poet who writes in Santali will not get the same standings because does not write in the regional dominant language. So you are not really a national poet because you write in an indigenous language. So yes, it is complicated, many layers over there.
I think a clear case for audiobooks, right? I mean, that's one way to get around the problem. If you're so divided by script, but everybody speaks the same language, at least there is a technological solution, and I hope that we'll get there. शैलेश जी, मैं आपके पास अंत में आ रही हूँ. मुझे मालूम है आप इसका बुरा बिल्कुल नहीं मानेंगे. शैलेश जी has started a very interesting publishing house called Hind Yugm, and he is a technocrat by training, and he has come into the world of publishing because he genuinely believed that contemporary Hindi literature simply did not cut it for him. And many of his contemporaries, whom he felt were getting drawn away from Hindi literature, even though he knew of the richness and depth of that literature, he felt he had to do something about it. I must tell you a little story. He wrote me a mail yesterday in Hindi, and then he said, "I'm sorry that I'm writing to you in Hindi." And I said, well, you know, you can be sorry about the fact that you wrote to me late, but please don't be sorry that you wrote to me in Hindi, because I don't think things have come to such a pass that you have to apologize for writing in your own language. So, Shailesh ji, I would invite you now to talk about your journey as a Hindi publisher. We've just heard about dominance of certain languages from Ruby in a similar kind of context. So, jiski lathi uski bhasha, क्या हिंदी उसी जगह पे है कि जिसकी लाठी है उसकी भाषा है. हिंदी is one of the dominant languages. Yet you feel that it is in a certain kind of a crisis. It's not able to draw in youthful readers. So we'd like to hear from you about your journey as a Hindi publisher.
बड़ा मुश्किल सवाल है कि अभी सेशन का नाम इंडियन रीडर है, लेकिन मुझे खुद ये लोकेट करना मुश्किल होता है कि हमारा रीडर असल में है कहाँ पे, हमारा पाठक कहाँ पर है. पाँच साल पहले जब हमने अपना पब्लिकेशन शुरू किया तो हमें ऐसा लगता था कि रीजनल लैंग्वेज में असल में रीडर नहीं है. अभी हम बैक ऑफ द स्टेज बात भी कर रहे थे कि पब्लिशिंग हाउस का रीडर के मार्केट से सर्वाइव करना बहुत मुश्किल है जब तक कि इंस्टीट्यूशनल ख़रीद ना हो उसमें. तो क्या हमने ऐसा मान लिया है? सचमुच में ऐसा है कि किसी भी रीजनल लैंग्वेज के पास इतना कंटेंट नहीं है? जैसे अभी रूबी ने बोला कि अगर ये संथाल, हम यहाँ पे असल में एक तरह की बिजनेस मीटिंग में हैं, तो मैं थोड़ी बिजनेस की भी बात करता हूँ कि संथाल लैंग्वेज में या उसकी 5 स्क्रिप्ट है, कोई एक स्क्रिप्ट में जब वो कोई बुक पब्लिश करती हैं तो क्या वो उनके लिए वो इतना बिजनेस देता है कि किताबें छप सकें और लोगों तक पहुंच सकें? क्योंकि 5 स्टेट में अगर आप एक स्टेट भी काउंट करें कि आप झारखंड के रांची के आसपास के संथालियों की चीज़ें अगर उन तक आप पहुंचा रही हैं, तो एक तो आपके सामने ये समस्या होगी कि सही में कितने रीडर हैं जो उसको ख़रीदना चाहते हैं. बात यह है कि कंटेंट है, आपने कंटेंट पब्लिश कर दिया, लेकिन क्या इतने रीडर हैं कि आप सस्टेन कर सकें, आपका पब्लिकेशन उन तक पहुंच के और आपको कुछ पैसे दे सके ताकि आप सरवाइव कर सकें? तो हिंदी में भी इसी किस्म की एक समस्या थी भी और है भी. तो हमें ये समझ में आया कि हिंदी के पास एक किस्म का गैप है. गैप ऐसा है कि जो बुक पब्लिश हो रही हैं और जो जिस किस्म का लिटरेचर अंग्रेज यहाँ के हिंदुस्तान के अंग्रेज़ी लेखक पब्लिश कर रहे हैं और जो हम लिटरेचर पब्लिश, यहाँ पे मैं स्पेशली लिटरेरी बुक की बात कर रहा हूँ, तो उसके जो रीडर हैं वो एक ख़ास किस्म के स्पेयर में आप उनको रख सकते हैं। वो ऐसे लोग हैं जो हिंदी की लिटरेरी मैगजीन्स पढ़ते हैं जिसकी रीच 10,000 या 15,000 है, उनमें से ही कुछ ऐसे रीडर्स हैं जो वो किताबों को ख़रीद के पढ़ते हैं। तो अल्टीमेटली वो इतने नहीं हैं कि कोई एक पब्लिकेशन हाउस बहुत बड़ा सा, जैसे कि उसमें नाम लेने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, वो अकेला उनके खरीद से सरवाइव कर सके। तो फिर क्या हम उस बिज़नेस को उसके आगे लेकर के जा सकते हैं? क्या रीडर सचमुच में नहीं है? तो हमें ये समझ में आया कि तमाम इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस की तरह हिंदी में भी समकालीन यानी कंटेम्प्रेरी विषयों पे किताबों की कमी है। उस भाषा में लिखे कंटेंट की कमी है जो आज का जनरेशन बोलता है। आज के जनरेशन को ये लगता है कि रीजनल लैंग्वेज, मैं स्पेशली हिंदी की बात करूं, में लिखा कंटेंट ऐसा कंटेंट है जो शायद उसको कंज्यूम नहीं कर पाएगा। वो उसी किस्म की बात है। आप ऐसे समझिए कि जब हम किसी हिंदी फिल्म में भी हिंदी के किसी टीचर को देखते हैं, हिंदी का जो शिक्षक होता है वो उस किस्म की भाषा बोलता है जो असल में हंसी का की भाषा है। उसको आप देख करके हंसते हैं, वो केवल और केवल इसलिए बनाया जाता है ताकि आप हंस सके। तो हालांकि ऐसी बात नहीं है, हिंदी के पास ऐसा कंटेंट नहीं है कि आपको उसको देख के हंसी आए, आप उसको समझ ना पाए। कंटेंट बहुत सारा ऐसा है जो हाईली कंज्यूम्ड हो सकता है, उसको खूब पढ़ा जाना चाहिए, और ऐसा कंटेंट हो सकता है दूसरी भाषाओं में ना हो। बहुत सारी ऐसी किताबें हैं। लेकिन आज की जनरेशन पे, पिछले इस 21वीं सदी के जनरेशन के ऊपर एक जो इम्प्रेशन है, वो इम्प्रेशन ये है कि हिंदी के पास जो कंटेंट है वो हमारे लिए नहीं है। हमारी जो भाषा है, इसकी बजाय हम वो भाषा समझ सकते हैं जो कि दूसरी अंग्रेजी भाषा का पॉपुलर कंटेंट है। तो हमने इस तरह का कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट करके देखा कि क्या जिस भाषा में हम बोलते हैं और उस भाषा में कंटेंट लाकर हम किसी तरीके से इस्टेब्लिश करने की कोशिश करें कि हाँ, हमारे पास आपके मतलब की चीज़ें हैं। तो उसने एक फ़र्क डाला है। लेकिन अभी भी हम ये नहीं ठीक ठीक कर सकते कि क्या किसी भी रीजनल लैंग्वेज के पास इतनी रीच है, इतना कंटेंट है कि वो पब्लिकेशन एक सरवाइव कर सके, और हम उस भाषा की जो विविधता है, उसका जो साहित्य है, उसको उसकी भाषा में बचा सके। मेरे ख्याल से आप कुछ और सवाल करेंगी तो मैं जवाब दे पाऊंगा।
Just for the benefit of the foreign guests who didn't get all the finer nuances of what Shailesh said, I'll try and sum up a few of the things that he said. He said that the current readership in Hindi did not feel that the highbrow literature of Hindi literature was suitable for their consumption. And he felt that there was a clear gap here in the Hindi market, which, if a more contemporary idiom or language was used, would draw in a new set of readers. He also talked about the economics of publishing and said that if the highbrow consumer was only 10 to 15,000, was that enough to create a product for? Or should you be looking at the large mass of readers who would want to read about more contemporary things? Was it possible to publish for them? So he's really talking about a new kind of a creator in the Hindi language, and he's talking about a new kind of an audience who he feels was hitherto neglected by the highbrow Hindi publisher. Am I right, Shailesh? So I think broadly that is what Shailesh said. We don't have a lot of time. We could just do one more round of quick remarks because I'm told that we don't have too many, we don't have enough time for questions. So Professor Bhattacharjee, if you'd like to add to what you last said, particularly with regard to, sorry, one question. Question का सत्र अभी शुरू नहीं हुआ है, पर I was told that there is no time for questions, so I was actually winding up. But if you feel that you want to ask a question which would be answered by anybody from the dais, that's fine. Please go ahead. Sorry. We're just making it up as we go along.
My question to Nirmal sir. So you told about the terrains of translation in the country and how, I mean, we all know that you've been very respectful person, very towering personality when it comes to bridging the gap of information between the institutions in India who are dealing with literature and the publishing community and the general readership. I would just like to make a small comment, and I would like to also ask, okay, translation, I mean, in order to get books translated in Indian languages, if the government chose English to be the route, hasn't it bulldozered out so much from its own ground? Because you see, when we are translating from international languages in Hindi, for example, at Vani, we always make it a point that we are translating from the original language without the use of English. And there are translators, of course. Translators are not in as much abundance, and good translators are even less. But haven't the institutions like Sahitya Academy and National Book Trust taken an easy way out and have erased so much connectivity between Indian languages?
No, I fully agree with you because any translation which is twice removed cannot be as good as it if it were done directly. But Aditi, you have to also understand that we cannot just sit there with our hands clasped because we do not have any translator. I'm talking of certain languages. If you want a Kashmiri book to be done into Assamese, then you do not have a translator. Even today, I'm talking of a time when this decision was taken that we will use the filter language of Hindi and English. That decision was taken some 40, 50 years back. But let us meet today on this ground, and still we could not really work in that direction. But I would also like to inform you that a lot of translation workshops are organized by both these institutions to develop translators so that direct translations are available. And things have improved amongst many languages. But still, there are certain languages where you do not find a direct translator. So, what do you do then? Do you stop translating from Kashmiri into Assamese? You don't. You say, okay, I will go for the second best. But I fully agree with you that when you do so, you are excluding a lot of nuances from being carried, but particularly culture specific transfer suffers in this process. But sometimes you have to decide that something is better than nothing.
I think we had one more question, just enough time for that, then we have to wind up.
Hi, I'm Deepika. I'm a publisher for the past 1.5 years, and an author, actually a translator, came to me last week. Last year, and she translated a Sanskrit scripture of her aunt into Tamil, and now this year she wants to do it into English. But I find the edit really loose, so I don't think she went through an editor when she did the Sanskrit translation to the Tamil to English. So I feel a lot of tightness of script was required. But I also feel the original Sanskrit work is completely lost in the English translation. So, like you said, sir, that you have to take a call. But as a publisher, I feel I wish the editor didn't go through the work. I mean, what do you do?
I think any of us could really answer that. Uh, the loss in cultural transmission that happens in this kind of Chinese whispers almost. So it is really your call as a publisher as to whether you think it's important to bring that Sanskrit work out into the readership of many other people reading it. You do sacrifice something, and like he's saying, intra-linguistic abilities in the country, which unfortunately have a lot to do with our education policies and how many languages each child was expected to learn when they were in primary school. That it's the fallout of that a lot of us today are sort of paying the price for. Because if we were all to learn one other Indian language, perhaps we would have many more bilingual and trilingual translators, editors, and so on. But we don't. And a lot of it then does happen to, the medium remains either English or Hindi, which are the dominant languages. So there is a price to pay, but I think at the end of the day, it's a price that many of us are willing to pay as, with a view to having access to that text in the first place. Because otherwise, how many people are speaking Sanskrit today? Very, very few. I hope that answers your question. as best as we could under the constraints of time. I think we. So thank you everybody for being a good audience and listening patiently to what is just the start of a big discussion and which needs to be discussed many times before we kind of unpack it fully. Thank you.